could forgive the missing overtime pay. I could maybe forgive the secret credit cards. But when I found those gift card receipts hidden in her purse, I went scorched earth. The 6:47 evening commuter rattled through the industrial corridor like it had every weeknight for the past 6 years. I settled into my usual seat, third car, window side, where the vinyl wasn't completely cracked through to the foam underneath. My steel-toed Red Wings found their familiar spot against the seat ahead, and I let out the kind of breath you only release when the shift clock finally stops ticking. The train car smelled like diesel exhaust and tired men. Across from me, Jerry from the electrical crew dozed with his hard hat balanced on his lap. 2 rows up, Martinez still had concrete dust in his hair from the foundation pour. We were all heading home to dinner, TV, and 8 hours of sleep before doing it again tomorrow. I pulled out my phone to check our joint checking account, something I'd started doing on the ride home ever since Stephanie mentioned we were running tighter than usual. The bank app took forever to load on the train's spotty signal. While I waited, I watched the familiar landscape roll by. Grain elevators, switching yards, the old Westfield shopping center with its half-empty parking lot. The balance finally appeared, $3,247. Not great, but not terrible either. I scrolled down to recent deposits, cross-referencing them with my mental tally of this week's hours. 53 hours total, 40 regular, 13 overtime at time and a half. Should have been a decent check. But the deposit showed only 40 hours. I stared at the screen, recalculating. Maybe payroll made an error. Happened sometimes with the new computer system Northern States Pipeline Corporation installed last spring. The old-timers were always complaining about glitches. The train lurched around a familiar bend, and Mrs. Chen from seat 4A dropped her newspaper. I leaned over to help her retrieve it from under someone's boots. "Thank you, dear," she said, adjusting her reading glasses. "These old hands don't grip like they used to." "No problem, ma'am." I settled back into my seat, but my mind stayed on those missing 13 hours. 13 hours at $31.50 overtime rate. That was over $400. Stephanie had been mentioning money more lately, asking when my next raise was coming, wondering if I'd considered applying for supervisor positions. $400 would have helped with whatever was making her nervous about our finances. I opened the photos I kept of my timesheets, a habit I developed after a payroll dispute 3 years ago. Ray Hutchinson, my supervisor, had taught me to document everything. Trust the system, but verify the numbers, Todd. That's how you stay out of trouble. Scrolling through last month's photos, I compared each week's recorded hours with the actual deposits. The pattern made my stomach tighten. Week 1, 47 hours recorded, 38 paid. Week 2, 51 hours recorded, 42 paid. Week 3, 49 hours recorded, 40 paid. Someone was skimming overtime. Consistently. The train's brakes squealed as we approached downtown station. Through the window, I could see Stephanie's silver Accord waiting in the pickup lane, exhaust visible in the cold November air. She was probably checking her phone, scrolling through whatever social media kept her occupied these days. I screenshot the evidence, thinking I'd need to talk to Ray first thing tomorrow. Maybe other guys were getting shorted too. The missing pay could explain why our account felt tighter lately, why Stephanie kept mentioning how expensive everything was getting. The train shuddered to a stop. I grabbed my lunch cooler and hard hat, joining the stream of workers heading for the exit. My boots clanged on the metal steps as I descended to the platform. Stephanie barely looked up when I slid into the passenger seat. The car smelled like her vanilla perfume and something else. Cologne, maybe? Something masculine that definitely wasn't mine. "How was work?" she asked, but her eyes stayed on her phone screen. "Long day. Hey, I think there's an issue with my paycheck. Looks like they're shorting my overtime hours." She glanced at me briefly, then back to her phone. "Maybe you miscounted your hours." The dismissive tone caught me off guard. Stephanie usually cared about money, especially when we were running tight. She was the one who balanced our checkbook, who knew exactly how much we had for groceries each week. "I keep photos of my timesheets," I said, pulling out my phone. "Look, this week I worked 53 hours, but they only paid me for—" "Todd, I'm trying to respond to something important here." Her thumb moved rapidly across her screen, double-tapping photos of expensive handbags and vacation destinations I didn't recognize. "Can we talk about this at dinner?" I watched her profile in the dashboard light. When had she started caring more about Instagram than $400 in missing pay? The Stephanie I married would have been on the phone with payroll before we left the parking lot. The drive home was quiet except for the hum of the heater and the occasional ping from her phone. I stared out at the streetlights, thinking about pressure gauges and how easy it was to spot when something wasn't running right. You just had to pay attention to the numbers. At dinner, Stephanie picked at her pasta while scrolling through her phone. I'd made spaghetti with meat sauce, nothing fancy but filling after a long day. She barely touched it. "So about that payroll issue," I started again. She didn't look up from her screen. "I'm thinking maybe someone in accounting is skimming overtime from multiple workers. The pattern's too consistent to be random errors. Maybe you should talk to your supervisor." Her tone was flat, distracted. I pulled out my phone to show her the timesheet photos, but she was already standing, carrying her half-full plate to the sink. "I'm going to take a shower," she announced, disappearing upstairs before I could respond. I sat alone at our kitchen table, listening to the water run through the pipes overhead. The house felt unusually quiet. Even the old refrigerator's hum seemed muted. Something about her reaction bothered me. Stephanie had always been our family's financial watchdog, the one who caught bank errors and questioned unexpected charges. Her disinterest in $400 missing felt wrong, like a pressure reading that didn't match the system load. Later that evening, I spread a shoebox full of receipts across the kitchen table. Tax season was still months away, but I liked to stay organized, sort everything by category, keep running totals, make sure we didn't miss any deductions. It was the same methodical approach I used at work: measure twice, cut once. Stephanie's shower had turned into a bath. I could hear her humming upstairs, some song I didn't recognize. She'd been listening to different music lately, artists I'd never heard of. When I asked about it, she said she was trying to expand her horizons. The receipts told the story of our daily life. Grocery runs to Kroger, gas from the Shell station near my work, the occasional dinner at Applebee's when we felt like splurging. I sorted them chronologically, my calloused fingers moving efficiently through the pile. But something caught my eye. Several receipts from Kroger showed unusually high totals for what appeared to be basic shopping trips. I pulled out 3 from the past month. $247 for milk, bread, and eggs. $189 for what looked like a routine weekly shop. $312 for items that should have cost maybe $60. I studied the receipts more carefully. The itemized lists seemed normal enough: produce, dairy, household items, but the totals didn't match. Either Kroger had started charging premium prices for everything, or— My hands stilled on the papers. 20 years of marriage, and I was sitting in my own kitchen questioning grocery receipts like some kind of detective. But the numbers didn't lie. They never did. The water stopped running upstairs. Stephanie's humming continued, that unfamiliar melody drifting down through the floorboards. I stared at the receipts spread before me, my pipefitter's brain automatically calculating pressure differentials and flow rates. Something was definitely leaking in our system. The question was where. I reached for the receipt closest to me and held it under the bright pendant light above the kitchen table. The fluorescent bulb hummed softly as I squinted at the itemized list, running my finger down each line. Milk, bread, eggs, ground beef. Then something that made my stomach drop. Gift card $100. I blinked hard and read it again. There it was, sandwiched between the hamburger meat and a bag of frozen peas like it belonged there. My hands started to shake as I grabbed another receipt from the same pile. Bananas, yogurt, cereal. Gift card $50. Toilet paper. Gift card $75. What the hell? I whispered to the empty kitchen. The humming upstairs had stopped. I could hear Stephanie moving around in the bathroom, the familiar sounds of her nighttime routine. But now there was something else. The low murmur of her voice. She was talking to someone on the phone. I spread more receipts across the table, my movements quick and urgent. Each one told the same story. Normal grocery items punctuated by gift cards in varying amounts. $25 here, $100 there, sometimes 2 or 3 per shopping trip. The receipts covered the table like evidence at a crime scene. My chest felt tight. 23 years of marriage, and I was sitting in my own kitchen discovering that my wife had been systematically hiding purchases from me. The methodical part of my brain, the part that calculated pipe pressures and flow rates, kicked into overdrive. Stephanie's voice drifted down from upstairs, animated and happy in a way I hadn't heard in months. She was laughing at something, that light, musical laugh she used to give me when we were dating. I grabbed a legal pad from the kitchen drawer and started making columns. Date, store, gift card amount. The numbers marched down the page in neat rows, each one a small betrayal I'd been too trusting to notice. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 11 times. Stephanie's phone conversation was winding down. I could hear her saying goodbye in that soft, intimate tone she used to use with me. By the time her footsteps started down the stairs, I had 12 receipts spread across the table, each one circled in red ink where the gift cards appeared. My hands had stopped shaking, replaced by the cold focus I used when diagnosing a system failure. "Todd, what are you still doing up?" Stephanie appeared in the kitchen doorway, her hair wrapped in a towel, wearing the silk robe I'd bought her for Christmas 2 years ago. "Found something interesting in these receipts," I said, keeping my voice level. She approached the table cautiously, her bare feet silent on the linoleum. "What kind of interesting?" I pointed to the nearest receipt. "Gift cards, lots of them, hidden in our grocery bills." Her face went through a series of micro-expressions, surprise, confusion, then something that looked almost like relief. "Oh, those. I can explain." "I'm listening." Stephanie pulled out the chair across from me and sat down, adjusting her robe. "They're for your sister's kids. You know how hard it is to shop for teenagers these days. I buy gift cards when I'm grocery shopping so I don't forget, then save them for birthdays and Christmas." The explanation came too fast, too smooth, like she'd been practicing it. "My sister lives in Oregon," I said quietly. "We send cash and cards." "Always have." A flush crept up Stephanie's neck. "Well, I thought we could try something different this year. Kids love gift cards." I picked up another receipt and held it out to her. "This one's from last January. You planning Christmas gifts 10 months in advance?" She reached for the receipt, but I pulled it back. Her wedding ring caught the light as she fidgeted with it, spinning it around her finger. I'd noticed that nervous habit years ago. She only did it when she was lying. "Todd, you're being paranoid. They're just gift cards." $3,000 worth of gift cards in 6 months? I'd been doing the math in my head while she talked. That's $500 a month in gift cards, Stephanie. For kids we see maybe twice a year. The color drained from her face. You added them all up?" "I'm good with numbers. Part of the job." She stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "I don't like what you're implying here." "I'm not implying anything. I'm asking a direct question. What are these gift cards for?" Stephanie's jaw tightened. "I already told you. If you don't trust me after 23 years of marriage, that says more about you than it does about me." She turned and walked out of the kitchen, her footsteps heavy on the stairs. A moment later, Our bedroom door slammed shut. I sat alone at the table, surrounded by evidence of... what exactly? The receipts stared back at me, their neat columns of numbers telling a story I didn't want to believe. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Ray Hutchinson didn't question it. I'd earned enough goodwill over the years that one sick day wouldn't raise eyebrows. Stephanie left for her part-time job at Dr. Morrison's dental office at 8:30, same as always. She kissed my forehead before she left, acting like our kitchen confrontation had never happened. "Feel better, honey. There's soup in the pantry if you want some lunch." The front door clicked shut, and I was alone with 6 months' worth of grocery receipts. I cleared the dining room table completely, pushing aside Stephanie's decorative runner and the ceramic bowl that held her car keys. The morning light streamed through the bay window, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like tiny accusations. Receipt by receipt, I built my case. January through June, laid out chronologically. The pattern was undeniable. Regular grocery shopping interrupted by systematic gift card purchases. Always different amounts. $25, $50, $75, $100, occasionally $150. Never the same total twice, but always present. My calculator sat beside a legal pad where I tracked the running total. Each entry made my chest tighter. $247 in January, $389 in February, $456 in March. By the time I reached June, my hands were trembling again. The grandfather clock chimed 10 times. The house felt enormous and empty without Stephanie's usual morning sounds. Her coffee maker gurgling, the local news playing on the kitchen TV, her humming as she got ready for work. I double-checked my math 3 times. The calculator's display showed the same number each time. $3,847. $3,847. Converted from our grocery money into untraceable gift cards over 6 months. Money I'd earned crawling through pipeline trenches and welding joints in sub-zero weather. The front door's lock clicked. Stephanie was home early. I heard her heels on the hardwood floor, then her sharp intake of breath as she saw the dining room. Every receipt was organized in neat piles, sorted by month, with my legal pad calculations visible beside them. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She stood frozen in the doorway, her purse clutched in both hands like a shield. "What's all this?" "You tell me." I pointed to the red circles I'd drawn around each gift card purchase. "Because I've been looking at these numbers all morning, and they don't add up to birthday presents for my sister's kids." Stephanie set her purse down on the side table, her movements careful and deliberate. "Todd, this is getting out of hand." "Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like someone's been systematically draining our grocery budget for months. Someone who knows exactly how much I bring home and exactly how much we need for actual food." She moved closer to the table, her eyes scanning the organized receipts. "You're making this into something it's not. Then explain it to me. Make me understand how we spent nearly $4,000 on gift cards in 6 months. Stephanie's face cycled through emotions I couldn't read. Finally, she sank into the chair across from me, the same spot where she'd sat the night before. "They're not all for the kids," she said quietly. "I'm listening. Some of them are for me, for things I need but don't want to put on our credit card." "What kind of things?" She looked out the bay window, avoiding my eyes. "Personal things, women's things. You wouldn't understand. Try me. Hair appointments, manicures, new clothes for work, doctor. Morrison expects his staff to look professional, and my old clothes." She gestured vaguely at herself. They were getting worn out. I studied her face, looking for the telltale ring spinning. There it was, her thumb working her wedding band around and around. "Stephanie, You could have just told me you needed money for those things. We're not broke. I know, but you work so hard for every dollar. I didn't want you to think I was being frivolous. The explanation felt hollow, like a pipe with too much pressure and not enough support. $4,000, Stephanie. That's not frivolous. That's systematic. Her defensive walls went back up. I don't like being interrogated in my own home. And I don't like discovering that my wife's been hiding major purchases from me for months. We stared at each other across the table, the receipts spread between us like a paper battlefield. The afternoon sun had shifted, casting long shadows across the evidence of whatever this was. That night, I lay in bed listening to Stephanie's breathing. It was too controlled, too even, the breathing of someone pretending to sleep. She'd been doing that more often lately, I realized. Fake sleeping while I tossed and turned beside her. The digital clock's red numbers glowed, 2:17 a.m. I stared at the ceiling, my mind churning through everything I'd discovered. The missing overtime pay, the hidden gift cards, her dismissive attitude about our finances, her new purse, her new clothes, her new music. The pieces were floating in my head like components of a system I'd never seen before. But slowly, reluctantly, they were starting to fit together into a picture that made my stomach churn. I thought about the phone call I'd overheard the night before. Stephanie's animated voice, her laughter, the intimate tone she'd used to say goodbye. When was the last time she'd laughed like that with me? The gift cards weren't for hair appointments or professional clothes. They were too systematic, too carefully hidden, too substantial. Someone was converting our money into untraceable currency, and that someone needed it to stay secret. Tomorrow, I decided, I'd dig deeper. Bank statements, credit card bills, anything that might show me where those gift cards were really going. Because the numbers didn't lie. They never did. And right now, they were telling me that the woman sleeping beside me, the woman I'd trusted with everything for 23 years, was financing something she couldn't let me know about. The clock's display blurred as I realized I wasn't looking at symptoms anymore. I was looking at evidence of something much worse. By my calculations, the gift cards totaled nearly $8,000 over 6 months. I spread 6 months of bank statements across the kitchen table like crime scene evidence. The yellow highlighter felt heavy in my calloused fingers as I marked each gift card purchase. $200 here, $350 there, all buried between milk and bread like financial landmines. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the paper trail. My coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but I couldn't stop. Each highlighted line told the same story. Tuesday and Friday, every week, like clockwork. $7,800, I muttered to the empty kitchen. My voice sounded strange in the silence. This wasn't impulse buying. Stephanie wasn't grabbing gift cards while waiting in the grocery line. The amounts were too consistent, the timing too precise. Someone was bleeding our account dry with surgical precision, and the methodical nature of it chilled me more than random spending ever could. I pulled out my phone and called Ray, my supervisor at the pipeline. "Brennan, it's past 9, buddy. Everything okay?" "Ray, I need to ask you something. Those overtime hours I've been pulling, the timesheets match what you submitted to payroll, right?" A pause. "Course they do. Todd, what's this about?" "Just checking something. Thanks." The overtime was real. The hours were real. But somehow $200 to $400 disappeared from our account twice a week, hidden in grocery receipts like she thought I'd never notice. 23 years of marriage, and I was sitting at our kitchen table feeling like a detective investigating my own life. Tuesday afternoon found me in the Westfield Shopping Center parking lot, engine running, thermos steaming against the windshield. 2 o'clock, prime gift card time, according to my calculations. Shoppers drifted past like ghosts while I watched the kiosk near the food court entrance. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white against the worn leather. This was crazy. I was spying on my own wife in a shopping mall parking lot. Then I saw her. Stephanie's red Honda pulled into a spot 3 rows away, and my stomach dropped like I'd missed a step on a ladder. She emerged wearing the black dress, the one I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. The fabric hugged her figure as she walked with purpose toward the gift card kiosk. I watched her select multiple cards, her movements quick and practiced. She knew exactly what she was doing. No hesitation, no comparison shopping, just grab and go, like she'd done this 100 times before. The transaction took maybe 2 minutes. Then she was walking back to her car, designer purse swinging, those cards disappearing into her wallet like they'd never existed. My phone buzzed. Text from Stephanie. Picking up groceries, home by 5. I looked at the Honda pulling out of the parking lot. She wasn't heading toward any grocery store I knew. I followed at a distance, feeling like a fool but unable to stop myself. Her route took unexpected turns away from home, winding through downtown streets we never traveled together. The late afternoon sun glinted off her windshield as she navigated traffic with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where she was going. She parked outside Romano's, an upscale Italian place with cloth napkins and wine lists we'd walked past a dozen times, always agreeing it was too fancy for people like us. Through the restaurant's windows, I watched her scan the dining room like she was looking for someone specific. A hostess in a crisp white shirt led her toward the back, past tables with real flowers and candles that weren't just decoration. My chest tightened as I saw them embrace. The man looked like everything I wasn't. Tall, lean, with the kind of confident posture that came from never doubting your place in the world. His suit probably cost more than my monthly take-home, and he wore it like armor. When he smiled at Stephanie, she lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years. I watched him pull out her chair, order wine without looking at prices, gesture with hands that had never held a wrench or felt the bite of metal shavings. Everything about him screamed money and success, the kind of life Stephanie had always talked about wanting. My phone camera clicked as they leaned across the table, her fingers tracing patterns on his wrist. 23 years of marriage, and she'd never looked at me like that. Not even on our wedding day. The photos felt dirty in my hands, but I kept taking them. Evidence, that's what this was now. Evidence collection, like documenting a pipeline leak before calling in the repair crew. Tuesday came around again, and I parked in the same spot, watching the same theater. This time I arrived early, engine off, waiting in the growing darkness. Marcus showed up first, stepping out of a black BMW that gleamed under the streetlights. He checked his Rolex, real gold from what I could see, and adjusted his tie like he was preparing for a performance. The car's lines were perfect, aggressive, the kind of machine that announced its owner's success from 3 blocks away. Everything my dented pickup truck wasn't. When Stephanie arrived, he kissed her hand like they were in some romantic movie. She giggled, actually giggled, like a teenager instead of a married woman pushing 50. The sound carried across the parking lot, sharp and unfamiliar. I raised my phone and captured the license plate. BMW 7841. Pipeline training kicked in. Document everything. Analyze the system. Find the weak points. Numbers didn't lie, and every system had vulnerabilities if you knew where to look. The morning light cut through our kitchen windows like a blade, casting everything in that harsh, unforgiving glow that makes you see things too clearly. I sat at our table, the one we'd bought together 15 years ago when we still talked about the future like it belonged to both of us, and watched Stephanie's manicured fingers drum against her coffee mug. The sound was sharp, metallic, impatient. She hadn't touched her coffee. Steam rose from the untouched cup, curling between us like smoke from something burning. "I think we need some time apart," she said, her voice steady as a pressure reading. She wasn't looking at me. Her eyes stayed fixed on some point past my shoulder, like I was a problem she was working through, rather than her husband of 23 years. I set my work thermos down with deliberate control. The metallic clink echoed in the silence, louder than it should have been. My hands stayed steady. Years of working with volatile equipment had taught me that much, but something cold was spreading through my chest. "Time apart," I repeated, tasting the words. They felt foreign in my mouth. "I've been thinking about this for months, Todd." She finally looked at me then, and I could see she'd been practicing this conversation. The words came out too smooth, too prepared. "We've grown apart. We want different things." I could smell her perfume, that expensive stuff she'd started wearing recently. The scent was too heavy for morning coffee, too deliberate. I didn't remember buying it for her. Come to think of it, I didn't remember her mentioning buying it either. "Different things," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, like it was coming from somewhere else. Stephanie shifted in her chair, her new bracelet catching the light. Gold. Real gold from the look of it. Another purchase I didn't remember. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller, like the walls were closing in. Like being in a confined space with a gas leak. You know something's wrong, but you can't quite put your finger on what. "You hold me back socially, Todd." The words hit like a physical blow. "Marcus understands my ambitions." Marcus. The name hung in the air between us like a live wire. She'd said it so casually, like I was supposed to know who Marcus was. Like he was part of our conversation, part of our life. But I'd never heard that name before, and the way she said it, with that little catch in her voice, that softness, told me everything I needed to know. "Marcus," I said quietly. Stephanie's eyes widened slightly, just a fraction. She'd made a mistake, and we both knew it. Her hand moved to her throat, fingers touching the gold chain there. Another piece I didn't remember. "Marcus Delacroix?" I asked, watching her face. "The investment banker?" The color drained from her cheeks like someone had opened a valve. Her coffee mug trembled in her hands, and for a second, I thought she might drop it. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. "How do you—" she started, then caught herself. Her mouth snapped shut like a trap. I pulled out my phone with movements that felt mechanical, automatic. My fingers found the screenshots I'd saved, the documents I'd printed at work yesterday while Jimmy was at lunch. The eviction notice from Riverside Drive, the court filing with Marcus Delacroix's name in black and white. "Your successful boyfriend," I said, holding up the screen so she could see, "was evicted from his apartment last month." Stephanie stared at the document like it was written in a foreign language. Her face went through a series of expressions: confusion, denial, something that might have been panic. The expensive perfume suddenly smelled cloying, sickening. That's probably a mistake," she stammered, but her voice had lost that practiced smoothness. "Or temporary. Marcus is between properties. He's looking at some high-end places downtown." I was already scrolling to the next document on my tablet. Years of reading technical specifications had taught me to be thorough, to check every detail twice. The IRS lien, the credit card judgments, the bankruptcy filing from 2 years ago. "He owes the government $23,000 in back taxes," I said, my voice steady as a pressure gauge reading. 3 credit cards in collections, total debt load around $90,000. Each fact landed like a hammer blow. I watched Stephanie's carefully constructed world crack a little more with every number. Her makeup, which had looked perfect in the bathroom mirror an hour ago, now seemed garish under the kitchen lights. Too much foundation trying to cover too many cracks. "You don't understand," she said, but her voice was getting higher, more desperate. "Marcus has investments. He's waiting on a big deal to close. These are just temporary setbacks." The truth hit me then like a pressure gauge blowing red. That moment when all the numbers you've been watching suddenly make terrible sense. The gift cards, the cash advances, the mysterious expenses that never quite added up. The expensive dinners she claimed were work events. "He's broke, isn't he?" I said quietly. That's why you've been stealing from us." Stephanie exploded out of her chair so fast it scraped against the floor with a sound like fingernails on metal. "It's not stealing," she shouted, her voice cracking on the words. "It's our money. I have every right to spend it." But even as she said it, I could see the truth in her eyes. She knew. She'd known all along what Marcus really was, what she'd been doing to us. The betrayal burned through me hotter than any welding torch, more dangerous than any gas leak. "Our money," I repeated, standing slowly. My legs felt unsteady, like I was working at height without proper safety gear. "The money I earn 60 hours a week at the refinery. The overtime I pull when my back's screaming and my hands are so raw I can barely hold my tools." Stephanie's face twisted with something ugly, something I'd never seen before. "Don't you dare lecture me about money, Todd. You think I don't deserve nice things? You think I should just sit here in this house forever, watching you come home covered in grease and oil, listening to you complain about your supervisor and your quotas?" The words hit like shrapnel, each one finding its mark. But underneath the pain, something else was building. Something cold and methodical, like the way I approached a complex welding job. Break it down. Analyze the problem. Find the solution. "How much?" I asked. "What? How much have you given him?" My voice was barely above a whisper now, but it cut through her protest like a plasma cutter through steel. "How much of our savings is gone?" Stephanie's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Her hands were shaking now, the expensive bracelet rattling against the table edge. In the harsh morning light, I could see the fine lines around her eyes that all that expensive makeup couldn't quite hide. She looked older suddenly, tired, like someone who'd been running a con for so long she'd forgotten what the truth looked like. "I want you to leave," I said quietly. The words surprised me as much as they surprised her. They'd come from somewhere deep inside, from a place I'd kept locked away for 23 years. The place where I stored all the things I'd never said, all the fights I'd walked away from, all the times I'd chosen peace over truth. "Todd, you don't mean that." "Pack a bag," I said, my voice steady as a torch flame. "Stay at your sister's, or stay with Marcus. I don't care anymore." For the first time since this conversation started, Stephanie looked genuinely afraid. The mask she'd been wearing, the wronged wife, the misunderstood woman, slipped completely. What I saw underneath was a stranger, someone I'd been living with for years without really knowing. "You can't just throw me out," she said, but her voice was small now, uncertain. "This is my house too." I looked around our kitchen, at the table we'd bought together, the coffee maker I'd given her for Christmas 3 years ago, the refrigerator covered with photos of a life that suddenly felt like someone else's memory. Everything looked the same, but it all felt different now, contaminated. 23 years, I said, more to myself than to her. 23 years, and I never saw it coming. Stephanie's face crumpled then, and for a moment, she looked like the woman I'd married, young and scared and sorry. But it was too late for sorry. Sorry was a luxury we couldn't afford anymore, like everything else she'd spent our future on. I picked up my thermos and headed for the door. I had to be at work in an hour, and Jimmy was counting on me to finish the pressure tests on the new pipeline section. Some things, at least, still made sense. Some things could still be fixed with the right tools and enough patience. Behind me, I heard Stephanie calling my name, her voice breaking on the syllables. But I didn't turn around. I'd spent 23 years turning around, coming back, trying to fix things that were broken from the start. The front door closed behind me with a sound like finality. The drive to work felt different. Every familiar landmark, the grain elevator, the railroad crossing, the billboard for Murphy's Auto, looked like pieces of someone else's life. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles white against the worn plastic. The radio was playing some country song about second chances, and I switched it off. I'd had enough of other people's stories for one morning. At the refinery, Jimmy was already suited up in his hard hat and safety vest, checking the morning reports. He looked up when I walked into the break room, his weathered face creasing into a frown. "You look like hell, Todd. Everything okay?" I poured coffee from the industrial pot, the liquid black as crude oil. "Just tired, I guess." Jimmy studied me for a long moment. We'd worked together for 8 years, and he could read pressure drops in my face better than most people could read gauges. "You sure? Because if something's eating at you, it's better to talk about it than let it build up. Seen too many good men crack under pressure they tried to handle alone." I almost told him then. Almost laid out the whole mess. The missing money, the gift cards, Marcus with his BMW and his lies. But the words stuck in my throat like metal shavings. Jimmy had his own problems. His daughter was getting married next month, and his wife had been battling cancer for 2 years. He didn't need my domestic disasters on top of everything else. "I'm fine," I said, draining half the cup in one swallow. The coffee was bitter, but it was real, unlike everything else in my life lately. The morning passed in a blur of routine maintenance and pressure tests. There was something soothing about the work, the precise readings, the predictable responses of metal and pressure and heat. When I tightened a fitting, it stayed tight. When I read a gauge, the numbers meant exactly what they said. No hidden meanings, no secret agendas, just physics and engineering and the honest truth of how things worked. Around noon, my phone buzzed. A text from Stephanie. "We need to talk. This isn't over." I stared at the screen for a long moment, then deleted the message without responding. She was wrong. It was over. It had been over the moment she chose Marcus's lies over our truth. I just hadn't known it yet. The afternoon brought a pressure drop in Section C that needed immediate attention. I suited up and crawled into the access tunnel, flashlight in one hand, wrench in the other. The confined space was hot and cramped, but it was quiet. No voices, no accusations, no lies. Just the steady hum of machinery and the sound of my own breathing. I found the loose connection and tightened it, watching the pressure gauge climb back to normal. If only marriages came with gauges, I thought. If only you could see the slow leaks before they became catastrophic failures. When I emerged from the tunnel, Jimmy was waiting with a concerned expression. "Got a call from your wife," he said carefully. She seemed upset. "Asked if you were working late tonight." My blood went cold. "What did you tell her?" "Told her you'd be done by 5, same as always." "But Todd," Jimmy's voice dropped lower. "She didn't sound right. Sounded like someone who was planning something. You might want to head home a little early today." I nodded, already pulling off my safety gear. Whatever Stephanie was planning, I needed to be ready for it. The morning had been about discovery. The afternoon was about consequences. The drive home felt like traveling through a minefield. Every turn, every traffic light, every familiar street corner could be hiding an ambush. Stephanie had always been good at strategy, at social maneuvering and image management. If she was planning something, it wouldn't be random. It would be calculated. I pulled into our driveway and noticed immediately that her car was gone. The house looked normal from the outside. Same beige siding, same neat flower beds, same mailbox with our names painted in cheerful blue letters. But something felt wrong. The air itself seemed charged, like the moments before a thunderstorm. Inside, the silence was absolute. No television, no radio, no familiar sounds of Stephanie moving through her routines. I called her name once, but the word just echoed back from empty rooms. In the kitchen, the bank statements were gone from the table. The coffee cups were washed and put away. Even the morning's confrontation had been erased, as if it had never happened. But in the bedroom, I found the evidence of her real intentions. Dresser drawers pulled open and hastily emptied. Closet space where her best clothes used to hang. The jewelry box on her vanity table. Gone. She hadn't just left for the afternoon. She'd moved out. On the bed, folded with military precision, was a note written on her expensive stationery. Todd, I've retained a lawyer. Don't try to contact me. We'll handle this through proper channels. S. No apology, no explanation, no acknowledgement of 23 years together. Just a business transaction, neat and clean and final. I sat on the edge of the bed we'd shared for over 2 decades and felt something inside my chest crack like a pressure vessel under too much stress. The room still smelled like her perfume, expensive stuff that came in bottles shaped like diamonds. But underneath that was something else, something masculine and unfamiliar. Marcus's cologne. In our bedroom, in the place where we'd planned our future and whispered our secrets and promised to love each other until death do us part. The welding truck's engine rumbled beneath us as I pulled away from the Riverside Drive apartments, my calloused hands steady on the wheel, despite everything churning inside my chest. Stephanie slid into the passenger seat like she owned it, adjusting the rearview mirror to check her makeup. Marcus climbed in behind her, all designer cologne and nervous energy. "Where are we going?" Stephanie asked, her voice carrying that careful tone she used when she thought I might be upset about something. I didn't answer right away, just pulled onto Highway 94, watching the storm clouds gather over the interstate like a dark ceiling pressing down on us. The cab smelled like metal shavings and the thermos of coffee I'd forgotten to finish that morning. Normal smells. Working man smells. Marcus was checking his phone, the blue light reflecting off his face in the growing darkness. Stephanie fidgeted with her wedding ring, the simple gold band I'd bought her 23 years ago when we could barely afford groceries. Now she was turning it around and around her finger like it was burning her. My toolbox rattled softly in the truck bed every time we hit a bump. Usually that sound comforted me, the familiar weight of honest work, tools that had never lied to me, never stolen from me. Tonight it sounded different, like a countdown. The highway stretched ahead, empty except for distant taillights disappearing into the darkness. Rain started speckling the windshield, just a few drops at first. I finally spoke. "Figured we should talk about our future." My voice came out calm. Same tone I used when reading pressure gauges at the refinery. Steady, technical, no emotion to cloud the facts. Stephanie glanced back at Marcus, who was staring out the window like the darkening sky might offer him some kind of escape. She cleared her throat. "Todd, I know things have been difficult lately between us." I raised one hand slightly off the steering wheel. Just a small gesture, but it silenced her completely. 23 years of marriage, and she still knew that signal. We passed mile marker 120. The rain was coming down harder now, drumming against the windshield with increasing intensity. The truck's heater hummed steadily, creating this intimate cocoon around 3 people who no longer trusted each other. I reached into my shirt pocket and pulled out a folded bank statement, placing it carefully on the dashboard where both of them could see it. $47,800, I said quietly. Gone in 14 months. Stephanie's face drained of color. In the rearview mirror, I watched Marcus shift uncomfortably in the back seat, his phone forgotten in his lap. "Todd, I can explain," Stephanie started. $3,200 per month in gift cards, I continued, my voice never rising, never wavering. Hidden in grocery receipts. You thought I wouldn't notice because I just read the totals, right? Didn't think the dumb pipefitter would actually check the itemized lists. The windshield wipers began their rhythmic sweep as the rain intensified. Each swipe revealed more of the dark road ahead, more of the truth I'd been avoiding for months. Every grocery trip, Kroger, Meijer, even that fancy Whole Foods you started shopping at. $50 here, $100 there, sometimes $200 in a single transaction. I kept my eyes on the road, hands steady on the wheel. Gift cards mixed in with milk and bread, like they were just another household expense. Marcus finally found his voice. Look, man, this is between you and your wife. I don't know what. My eyes found him in the rearview mirror, and whatever he saw there made him stop talking. Actually, Marcus, it's between all of us now. I kept that same calm tone, like I was explaining a weld specification to a new apprentice. See, I know about the BMW payments, 3 months behind. His confident facade cracked just a little. Stephanie turned to look at him, confusion replacing the guilt on her face. I know about the foreclosure notice on your apartment, the one taped to your door last Tuesday when you thought nobody was watching. The rain pounded harder against the glass, creating a wall of sound around my methodical destruction of their lies. I know about the $89,000 in credit card debt. The collection agency's calling 3 times a day. Stephanie's voice came out as barely a whisper. Is that true? Marcus couldn't meet her eyes. He was staring down at his hands, soft hands that had never held a welding torch, never felt the bite of hot metal. We passed mile marker 127, and I pulled the truck to the shoulder. The hazard lights started blinking, orange reflections dancing across the rain-soaked windshield. The engine idled beneath us, steady and reliable like everything else I'd built my life around. Stephanie, you weren't funding a relationship, I said, letting the words settle in the sudden stillness. You were funding a con. The rain drummed on the roof above us. In that intimate space, with nowhere to run and nowhere to hide, the truth finally had room to breathe. I also know you're not an investment banker, Marcus. Haven't worked in 8 months. The fancy suits, the expensive dinners, the talk about your portfolio, all of it paid for with money stolen from my overtime checks. Stephanie turned to stare at Marcus, and I watched her see him clearly for the first time. Not the successful businessman who understood her ambitions, but a broke con artist who'd been using her the same way she'd been using me. Marcus reached for the door handle, but I hit the door locks. We're not done talking yet. The silence stretched between us like a high-pressure line ready to burst. Marcus shifted in his seat, leather creaking beneath him. Stephanie's breathing had gone shallow, quick little gasps that reminded me of a damaged compressor struggling to maintain pressure. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone, thumb sliding across the screen with practiced ease. Divorce papers, I said, holding it up so they could both see the screenshot. Filed yesterday morning. Stephanie's hand flew to her mouth. The sound cut through the truck's cabin like a pressure release valve opening too fast. All accounts frozen as of this morning. Emergency motion granted. My voice stayed level, professional, the same tone I used when explaining welding procedures to new hires. The house is in my name alone. Checked the deed last month when I started putting the pieces together. Marcus was pulling at the door handle again, panic making his movements jerky and desperate. The locks held firm. My attorney, Janet Kowalski, has copies of everything, I continued, scrolling through more screenshots. Every receipt, every transfer, every gift card purchase hidden in grocery bills, every lie. The rain kept hammering the windshield, but inside our metal cocoon, the only sound was Stephanie's quiet sobbing. She'd pressed her face into her hands, shoulders shaking like she was coming apart at the joints. Let me out, man, Marcus said, his voice cracking on the last word. This is crazy. I met his eyes in the rearview mirror again. In the dim light from the dashboard, he looked younger than I'd thought. Softer. The kind of man who'd never had calluses, never felt metal burn through work gloves, never earned anything with his hands. What's crazy is thinking I wouldn't notice, I said. I read pressure gauges for a living, Marcus. I notice when things don't add up, when the flow doesn't match the input, when someone's bleeding the system dry. Stephanie wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving streaks of mascara across her knuckles. Todd, please, we can work this out. We can fix this. For the first time since we'd gotten in the truck, I turned to look at her directly. Really look at her. The woman I'd married 23 years ago was still there somewhere, buried under layers of lies and expensive makeup and designer clothes I'd unknowingly paid for. "We could have," I said quietly, 14 months ago, before you decided I wasn't enough, before you decided my money was good enough, but I wasn't." The truck's heater kept humming its steady rhythm, pushing warm air through the vents, but the warmth felt hollow now, mechanical, like everything else in my life had become. I reached for the door locks, and the soft click echoed in the silence. "I'm taking you both back to town. Then I'm leaving." I shifted into drive and pulled back onto the highway, windshield wipers maintaining their steady beat against the rain. The truck accelerated smoothly, carrying us back toward the scattered lights of town. In the distance, I could see the storm moving on, leaving patches of clear sky behind. "Leaving for where?" Stephanie's voice was small, defeated. "Alaska." The word felt strange in my mouth, like a foreign language I was still learning. "Arctic flow systems. Pipeline work in Prudhoe Bay." She turned in her seat to stare at me. "When?" "Truck's already packed." I checked my side mirror before changing lanes, old habits keeping me safe even when everything else was falling apart. "Leaving tonight." The highway stretched out ahead of us, wet asphalt reflecting our headlights back like a broken mirror. We drove in silence for several miles, the only sounds the engine's steady rumble and the gradually softening rain. "Todd," Stephanie finally whispered. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I nodded once, acknowledging her words without accepting them. Some things couldn't be fixed with apologies. Some pressure vessels, once cracked, never held the same way again. Marcus had gone quiet in the back seat, finally understanding that his part in this story was already over, that whatever game he'd been playing, the rules had just changed completely. As we reached the city limits, I felt something settle in my chest. Not peace exactly, but the kind of calm that comes after a difficult repair is finally complete. The system might never run the same, but at least it was honest now. "You know what the funny thing is?" I said, pulling up to the apartment complex where this had all started. "You two actually deserve each other. Both living in debt, both lying about who you are, both taking what isn't yours." I put the truck in park and looked at them one last time. But I deserve better. Stephanie and Marcus climbed out without another word, standing in the parking lot like lost children as I rolled down my window. "The papers will be served tomorrow," I called out. "My lawyer has your forwarding address." Then I drove away, watching them shrink in my mirrors until they disappeared completely. The rain had stopped, leaving the pavement gleaming under the streetlights like fresh welded steel. My truck felt lighter somehow, like I'd finally dropped a load I'd been carrying too long. The highway opened up ahead of me, leading north toward a job that would pay me what I was worth, toward a life where the only person I had to trust was myself. The radio crackled to life, some late-night trucker reporting clear roads ahead. I reached for the dial to turn it up, then stopped. The silence felt better, cleaner. In my rearview mirror, the town lights faded to nothing. Behind me lay 23 years of marriage, a house full of memories, and a woman who'd chosen a stranger over the man who'd given her everything. Ahead lay Alaska, and a future I'd build with my own two hands. The speedometer climbed steadily as I merged onto the interstate. My welding truck was already loaded in the back. Torch, rods, everything I'd need to start over. Tools didn't lie. They didn't cheat.